All right. Now, what we want to do now is add in our floor in our ground floor, right? So that floor will be at the same level as this floor. And if we click on this floor, we can see that it's on level 2. So if we go to level 2 now, all we really need to do is to now draw a floor inside here on level 2. Now, you can notice that you see level 1 in the background, and that is there because we have the underlay option on, and the underlay is showing us level 1. So, we can have a reference of where that is. So all we need to do now is to go to the architecture tab, we'll go to the floor tool, and we're going to choose the type of flooring. In this case, we're going to use the same flooring as we used before. So let's take a look on that floor. If we look here, we see that we use the generic 12-inch. So we're going to use the same generic 12-inch for now. So let's go to architecture, go to flooring and generic 12-inch. And all we're going to do is we can pretty much just draw a rectangle starting from here all the way to this corner. Now we may need to change that later, so that's fine. So we're going to choose OK. And it asks the question if we want to attach the walls to the bottom. We may do this later, but we're not going to do this right now. So we're going to say don't attach. So if we look on that in 3D, we can see that we have our floor like that. We do need to adjust it to come over to this wall here. So I'm going to go to edit boundary, and I'm going to go to the align tool. Select this surface here and choose the sketch. Then we're going to choose OK. No, we don't want to attach. All right. And that's it. That is how we can get our floor slab in. Now, notice that we are seeing the floor protrude. If I switch this over to shaded mode, you can see what I mean. So this is the floor that's showing below. Now, ultimately, I would say when we are close to finishing the model, we're going to tidy these up. And the way we actually do that, remember that question that it asked earlier, if we want to trim the slab to the next floor, that's what it's saying. So all we need to do is to select our walls, and then we just choose this option to attach top or base, and then choose the surface we want to attach the wall to. Now when we click that, notice it disappears, and what it's actually doing, it's stopping the wall on the lower part of the floor, which is a good thing. But what I suggest is doing this later on, because what happened is that this model is not complete yet, and it is going to make certain decisions. So for example, notice that it adjusts this wall, and we may or may not want to have this wall on the height below the floor yet. So I'm going to undo that. We can always edit that when we are nearing completing the model, right? Are you going to find yourself going back and forward at this early stage? So that is how we get in the floor. Really simple. Okay, now at this stage, we also want to get into our model the major structural beams, right? So if we take a look on our project guide here, we can see that in this section here, we have some main I-beams that's going in this direction. There's actually a close-up detail of it. And we see that it is the MW wide flange with these exact specs, right? So that's what it looks like. And if we look on this cross section here, we can see that we have an I-beam here, here, and here. And this detail is actually the detail that we saw before. So what we want to do is to start to put in our main structural elements. We also notice that the thickness of this floor is 150 millimeters. So we can start to get those adjustments in. So let us look at our floor here. Right now we have this floor that is at 12 inches generic flooring. Now we can detail this floor to look just like the drawing. So what we can do about this deck here is, based on what we have in the drawings, we can just actually change this from floor, and we can just pick this one, or we can pick the 150 millimeter concrete and metal deck. Now, if you don't see this here and you only see this one, it's no problem. You can click it and notice that it will change here, right? And don't worry, we can change the name and the thickness of this as we go on, right? So for example, if we go to our section view, so for example, we see that there's a section here and here's a section here. So we can go to section 1 and then we see that's the metal deck that is actually there, right? Now, if we click on this, it's going to tell us that it's the 3-inch lightweight concrete and 2-inch metal deck. And if we take a dimension here to here, we can see that this is 127 millimeters. Now, we want this to be 150 millimeters. And we can see that this is imperial measurements here. So what we're going to do is we can just go to edit type here. And this will come up. Now, what we can do is we can just duplicate this and change the name. And we might be going into a little bit of detail here, but for now, let's just continue with this. So I will say that I will just call this 150 millimeter deck floor. I can give it any name. The fact that I put 150 millimeters in here obviously does not change the thickness. I need to go into the structure to do that. And this is the important part now. So I want this structure, the core of it, to be about 125 millimeters. Then I'm going to insert another layer, and I'm going to put this above the core by pressing the up button. So now I have the structure, which is going to be 125 millimeter, and then I have a floor surface, and I can just put that as a finish and let that finish be 25 millimeters. I can also choose a material for that, but we're not going to go into that detail just yet. I just wanted to kind of give you a preview of where you would go to change that. So notice that it's now 150 millimeters and it has the finished floor in there. Now, usually at this stage, we don't go into this much detail, so we're not going to worry too much about that at this stage. However, we do need to add our I-beams. So if we take a look on our drawings here, remember our main objective here is that we want to add this I-beam here. And if we look at this detail in our reference drawings, we can see that that is what it should look like. So we already had the metal deck in, and we actually put in this detail. Now we need to get this I-beam, and we can see that it is a we need to import this beam into our project. Now, in order to do that, we need to go over to the structure tab. Then we're going to go over to beam. Then we're going to go to load family. Now, depending on where and on how you last browse your libraries, if you look here, you will see the path of your libraries. And I'm going to go back up to where it says libraries. notice I get the option of English or English Imperial. So I want you guys to go into English, which simply means it's going to be metric. We're going to go to US. We're going to scroll down and we're going to look for structural framing, because that's what the category is, and we're going to go to steel, and we're going to look for the MW wide flange. Now when you click that, you're going to get this table that gives you all the different standard sizes. So of course we are looking for this one, 310 by 38.7. So if we scroll all the way down to 310 by 38.7, there we go, and choose OK. And I have it in my project already, so that's okay. I'm just going to overwrite it. Now, if I just draw a line now, maybe like that, you will see that I have the beam here. Now, of course, I don't want the beam to be over here, so I'm going to delete this for now. And what I'm going to do, a beam is meant to be drawn on the level that you place it on. So for example, this beam that I just drew right here, if you look, it says that it's going to be drawn on level 1. So if I orbit this around, you can see that this beam is on level 1. So what I want to do is that I want to get the beams to be on level 2, because it's going to be in the floor of level 2, right? So if I look at my section view here, right? So this is where my level 2 is. And if I draw the beams on level 2, it is going to start inside this floor. So I would want to draw these beams to be 150 millimeters offset from the floor level. So to do that, I'm going to go to my level 2, and I'm going to draw these beams in. So these beams are supposed to be along these edges here. So I'm going to go for beam. I'm going to choose the beam here. And I'm going to draw it from in the wall all the way to the center of the wall. So I'm going to go from the center of the wall to the center of the wall. All right, I'm going to press escape. So this is my first beam here. Now, if you notice, you're seeing the beam in my drawing here. If I didn't have underlay on, so by default, you might have show underlay to none. That means you're not going to actually see the beam because the beam is below the cut plane, right? So if you go to section, you will see that beam. And actually, we're not seeing the beam here. If we go back to our second floor, we can see that is because this section line is really cut after the beam. Remember, we placed the beam here. Let's turn on back underlay. So we want to be able to see level 1. And yes, you can see that the beam is actually behind there. So what we actually need to do, let's cut a section this way just to show our beam. So I'm just going to go to view, grab a section and draw a section line this way, right? Remember, with these sections, we can delete them at any time, right? And here we go, section 3. So if I double click that, you will see that the beam is here. Now, a couple of things to notice. Notice that the beam is only shown as a single line, and the reason for that is because the rivet is set to be coarse, which means basically low detail. So if we put it to high detail, notice we see the beam and some other details, like we see the detail of the flooring and all of that. So if you ever wonder why you're not seeing it, that's the reason why. Now you can see here that the beam is actually sitting inside the floor, and we really want it to sit under the floor, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to offset the start and the end by 150 millimeters. Actually, negative 150. There we go. So now the beam is sitting by the floor there. Now we can actually duplicate this from here. So we could go to copy, and we can actually copy the beam in the other locations, which is going to be, I believe it's here and here and here. So if we look in 3D, the beams are actually inside the building, and what you're going to find out as this building gets detailed is that the only way to see inside what's happening inside of this building is you can either switch to wireframe, so you can see the beams going there, or let's go back to hidden line. My personal favorite is to enable the section box like that, and just adjust the box so that you can see what's happening. So from here, you can see what's happening where you see the beams coming across, going through the main columns there, right? Which is similar to what we have going for our reference images, right? We have these beams going across like that. All right, so that is how we add the main structural elements, at least for this floor, in. Okay, so while we are adding our main structure, right? If we take a look at our drawings here, we will see that we also have another type of beam on the top floor. We also have some purlins that go across, but we are just going to concentrate on the main structure for right now, being that the model is so early. So in order to add this structure here, let's look at what the details have. Now, we have a couple of sections here that we can use. We can see this is the beam that's here. This is from the front view. I would say that this gives us a better view. So for example, we can see that the total roof height is going to be 9,500 millimeters. Now in our drawing, if we go to a section view here, we can see that our top level is also 9,500 millimeters. So that is great. So what we can tell from this, let's go to a different section. This is our column that's here. So there are our columns, and you can see that the columns go all the way up to 9,500. Let's take a look on our 3D view. Now, based on our 3D view, we would be looking for our web joist to span something like that, right, in that region. Now, also another point to note that typically when we do drawings and we represent structure, it is not necessarily up to the architect to calculate the exact structure that's going to be used. Usually, we will do a representation of it in our drawings, but the actual specs of the structure would come from the structural engineer, right? So, though we are going to be choosing a specific type of beam, this is not necessarily representing the exact beam that would be used, but more of a representation. All right, so with that said, all we need to do is we need to have an idea of how tall these columns must be and how tall the beams must be, right? So what we could do is if we go to the topmost floor, that is the third floor, Of course, this is all we're seeing on the third floor. And the reason we're seeing this, if I go to a 3D view here, kind of go up like that. And I believe we have this hidden, so let's unhide this. So you can see that's our third floor there. And if you look at what the third floor is cutting, the third floor is cutting under these walls here. So hence, when you go to the third floor, which is our roof level, this is all you're seeing. Now, if we want, let's get rid of this section here because we're not using it. Now, if we want to see the floors below, we have to enable the underlay, and we can say, show me level 2. So now it's showing me the floors below, and here are the beams. Now, I mean the columns that are here. So if we remind ourselves of the plan, we should have some beams that is stretching across there like that, right? Also, we'll have some purlins that are going this way, but we're not going to include those just yet. Let us just work on the main structure. Now, of course, it is a beam, so we use the very same approach. We can just choose beam. Of course, this is the last beam that we use, so if we should draw a beam like this, it's going to be drawing the I-beam that we have there. And of course, in order to see the full detail of the beam, we need to change this to fine detail. So you're actually seeing it there below. So I'm going to actually undo that because if you look on our drawing here, you can see that we don't have the I-beam that was down here. We have a open web beam. So if we look at this close up here, we can see that this is the MK series bar joist angle 12K1. So all we need to do is to import that beam. So when we click beam, instead of drawing our beam, we're going to do the same thing again, load family. And we should be in the same folder as before. So we just need to look for MK, this one. We double click that. And then we're going to look for the specific one. If we look back here, we can see that this is the 12K1. 12K1. Now, as I said, usually if we're doing this in architectural drawings, it's just to represent the beam. Remember how Revit is meant to work. It's really meant to work collaboratively, which means that your engineer is also using this very same drawing, and they would be the one to specify the beam. All right, so I'm going to put one that goes across like this. And I can put another one that goes across like this. I'm going to stop it in the center of the wall. All right, I'm going to make sure that this is set to fine detail, so I'm actually seeing the beam there. I'm going to press escape. All right, so notice that I can't click on it, and the reason for that is because this is really showing me what's on the level below. So if I turn off underlay, it will disappear, right? So underlay will show you what's below. Oops, let's look at underlay for the second floor, right? It will show me what's below, but it's not going to give me the ability to click it. Now, if I want to be able to click it, I could use the allow select underlay elements, and that would allow me now to click these elements. This was the first beam that we drew, so I can delete that. So I can actually click these elements now. So that is this button here. Usually it's off by default because when you're overlaying or underlaying, you don't want to be able to click the elements below. So that's why it's off usually by default. Now there's one more thing to change. If I look on this section that we have here, so let's open that section. You can see that is what we're seeing there. Now, just as a point to note, we're not seeing the beam in the background. Let's look back on our section view here. Yeah, okay, good. So that is, no, it's this view, right? There we go. So we're not seeing the beam in the background because we're actually cutting behind the beam. So I'm going to move this in front like that. So now we're seeing the beams in the background. So we can see we have the joist here. Now there's one more thing though. If we look here, we can see that the joist isn't at the top. Because remember, if we look at this section here, this is the top that we have as the beam as 9,500 millimeter, but it's actually the open web beam here is actually, when you add these measurements up, it's actually 310 millimeters below the roof level. So what we need to do now is we need to go back here and we need to select the joist here, and we're going to actually, if we select it here, we're only selecting one, so let's do it in 3D view. Oh, we're actually selecting both of them. That's good. And we are going to say start offset and end offset minus 310 minus 310. There we go. So now the beam is at the correct height. And then we can just copy this using the third floor. There we go. Shortcut CO to copy. And I'm going to paste one here. All right. And that's it. Now, if we look on 3D here, we're not going to be placing a beam here. Because if we look on our drawings, maybe this one, we can see that it actually stops in, a better one would be this one, right? We can actually see that this column that's here is actually lower. So there is no open web joist at grid line D. There's only at B and C. Oh, and there's another one down here at A. So there should be another grid line and a column actually here, right? All right, so that is how we add in all the major elements. So usually when you are in the process of detailing your model, structural elements like columns and beams, you want to get those in so that they can help shape the rest of your model. All right. Now, as it relates to the purlins, you might want to do this later. You can choose to do this from now, and then you can always refine it as it is later. If we look on the drawings here, we can see that we have these C channels that's running perpendicular to the web joist here, and we know that it's 111 in thickness, and then on top of that we have our roof slab. So in order to get those members that's running, whenever you have multiple beams that you need to show, instead of drawing them individual like what we're doing here, we would then use a beam system. So if we go to structure here, now when we go to structure, we want to choose beam system. Now, when we're in beam system, we need to look at the level that we're at, and let's look at the height that we have here. We know that these members here are going to be approximately 200 millimeters offset from the 95 millimeter height that we see here. So when we're drawing the beam system, we could choose to draw it and then we edit it. So for example, I can just click rectangle here and I can just draw in the beam system here. Oh, I'm going to press escape because we don't want it to be on level 1. So I'm going to cancel that and go back into the beam system. And well, right now you can see that the work plane is on level 1. So we want to set work plane here and choose level 3. So now the beam system will be on level 3. So I'm just going to draw a box, and I'm doing this in 3D view. You can do this in top view as well. So I could just draw a box from here to here, maybe. You know what? I'm going to just draw that. Let me spin this around. Draw this box to there. There we go. Now, when I choose OK, notice what happens. It is going to now spawn multiple web joists. And what we want to do, we don't want the web joist there. That's the first thing. It needs to be C channels. So we're going to need to load those in. So we're going to go to Beam. We're going to load. And we can choose any one of these. We're still in the same imperial metric. So that's the English, US, structural framing, steel. And I'm going to just pick this one, AISC. And I'm going to just pick the first one. It doesn't really matter which one. We're just representing. So we're going to choose OK. And I'm just going to pick the closest one to the one that we have. This wasn't an exact specification, right? So I'm just going to pick the one that says 12 by 30 maybe. Yeah, I'm just going to pick one of these. Choose OK. All right, so now it's loaded in. Here it is. Now, of course, I don't need to draw it, so I'm going to press escape. Now I'm going to hover over the beam system, not the beam. So notice that I have the beam system selected. Then what I want to do is to change the beam type from this and change it to this that I have here. And voila, notice it changes there. Now the next thing I need to do, let's look at our section view here. Obviously, this needs to be sitting on top of the web joist here. So first thing I want to do is I want to actually edit these beams. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go to edit type. And so while we're here, we want to change the height of this C channel. And to do that, we're going to go all the way down. Scroll down till we see height. Now notice these heights are in inches, not necessarily millimeters, and that's really just because of the family that was used to create the C channel. Well, inches was used, but it doesn't matter. We're just going to type for the height 150. Make sure you put the mm for millimeters. Choose OK. Now this is 150 millimeters. Now, all we have to do now is adjust the height of the beam system. Now, we can go back to 3D view if it's hard to select in that view. So here you can see I have the beam system highlighted, and I know that it needs to be minus 200 millimeters from the top level. So I'm going to choose that. There we go. So now, if I look back at my section view now, you can see, well, it's almost sitting here. Not quite. Actually, the reason for this, if we look back on the drawings here, this is actually 110 millimeters, not 150. So that's why it's not working out. So let's head back over here, and we need to go back here. And we need to change the height to 110 millimeters. There we go. So now it's sitting on top of the member here. Now all we need to do now is to add the roof, and that's going to be really simple. If I go to a 3D view, the roof would sit on top of all of this. And to do that, we would need to go to architecture, and of course we're going to choose roof. Now, this is a common misconception that you can choose floor instead of roof. Of course, in this case, there is no floor on top of this level. So really and truly, what we need to choose here is roof. Now, just because you see this symbol for roof, it doesn't mean that it has to be a hip roof or gable roof. So we're gonna choose the roof, and what we're gonna do is this is a 3D view. We can use a 3D view. Just ensure to change your work plane. And we're going to change the work plane to level 3. Make sure that you're on level 3. Now, when you draw the roof, if I rotate this here, yep. So let me start from this corner here. And then we go all the way to this corner here. Now, what kind of roof material do I want to use? In this case, if I look back on my drawings here, I know that the roof is 150 millimeters thick, and it is 50 millimeters below the parapet wall that's here. So if I head back over to Revit here, I need to have a roof that is 150 millimeters. Now, currently, I don't have that, so I'm just going to use this 12-inch, and then I'm going to modify it later. Also, I know that I want to offset this minus 50 millimeters from that level. And I'm going to just choose OK. Now, of course, we get a gable roof here, and the reason for that, let's go back to edit roof footprint, is because we have the slopes icon on the edge of our roofs here. So what we need to do is to select each one and turn off slope. You can do multiple, so I can select both of them and I can say turn off. Actually, I have to do one at a time. So let me turn that off. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to choose OK. And now the roof is completely flat, which is great. Now I just need to change the type of roof. So I will click this roof. I'll go to edit type. Then I will duplicate it. And I will just call this roof slab. I'm going to choose OK. All right. And I'm going to go into edit structure, and I'm going to change the structure to be 150 millimeters. I can also change the material if I want, but you can do this maybe closer to when you are finishing. I would just choose concrete, choose OK, and choose OK, and choose OK. All right, there we go. So now if I should use my section box and take a look, you will see that I have my structure here. Let's see. So I have these guys, and then I have the roof sitting on top. Let's take a look on it in section. This should actually be a little lower. Oh, I see what's happening here. So the roof slab, let me check this here. So this is 150 millimeters, which it should be 150, but the 150 is sitting on the level. That's what's happening here. So what we need to do is we actually need to let this be minus 200 millimeters. Good. So now it's sitting on top of here. All right. So that is it. That is how we create our main structure, our columns, and our framing. And we explored different types of framings, web joists, C-channels, I-beams, all there. Now, the final thing we need to do is to add a ceiling level, right? So if you notice the on our little diagram here, you can see that we actually had a ceiling that is below the floor slab here. And in that ceiling, we actually have light fixtures, right? So in Revit, light fixtures can only be inserted into ceilings. So in order to get the ceiling here, it's really simple. It's almost like you're drawing another floor. You can do it in 3D view if you wanted to as well. So for example, I can choose ceiling under architecture. And it's going to ask me to sketch. Now, perhaps what I want to do is I will go to sketch ceiling that's here. Then it's going to ask me to draw the ceiling. Before I draw it, I definitely would want to be on the level that says ceiling. So if you notice, I actually already made a level for the ceiling. Notice it's just a reference level, so it doesn't have an actual floor plan. And I called it ceiling. And you can see it's below level 2. So what I would do, I would change this to say, put me to the level 1 ceiling. And then I would draw the ceiling. Now, it's going to be tricky for me to draw the ceiling here. So perhaps what I'll do is go to the second floor where I can see the floor below. And then I will draw the ceiling here to here. Now it's going to ask me the type of ceiling. I'm going to just leave that on the default and choose OK. Now, of course, you may not see it there, but if I go to 3D view, you will see my ceiling here. Now, this ceiling should not be here. It needs to be, oh, it's because I have a height offset. So I'm going to set that to 0. There you go. So now the ceiling is on the correct place, which is here. Now, of course, I can switch this to fine so that I can see the ceiling detail that is there. Now, the other thing we might want to do is to add some lighting in the ceiling. I did represent some lights that are added here, which you can see in this diagram. So in order to do that, what we would need to do is, firstly, it's important to note that lighting by default can only be applied to the ceiling. So in order to do that, we need to go to architecture and go to component, then load family. Now you want to be in, so we're in US. Then you want to look for the lighting folder. Go to architectural, then go to internal. And then here we go, ceiling light. I'm going to choose the linear box. And of course I have it already, so I'm just going to replace it. And now I can actually place these light fixtures here. Now, obviously these are not properly aligned. And the tricky thing about ceiling is that we might say, oh, but how can we get to align our lighting? Obviously, if we go to level 2, we're not going to be able to see it because we're actually looking down behind the ceiling. So in order to see what's happening on the ceiling, we need to go to our reflective ceiling plan. So that's level 1, reflective ceiling plan. And then you're able to see these lights. And now you can use Revit, the regular Revit commands to do things like align, where you can align the light to the grid like that, and so forth and so forth. So that is how you would adjust the lighting on the ceiling. All right. So if we take a look in 3D, that is what we are seeing right now. All right, great.